coming up, we're gonna look into plant-based foods. So it's something that sort of is getting more and more. I was going to say the word popular, but a lot more aware. People are a lot more aware of plant-based foods. I certainly am myself. So we've got plant-based chefs Henry Firth and Ian Theasby, aka BOSH, going to come aboard the show and give us more of an insight into the future of sustainable food. So on the show, Henry and Ian, can you give us a bit of a rundown what the research suggests?
Yeah, so there's been some incredible new research from the Almond Board of California about the future of food. So one of the really interesting facts is that over half of Brits believe that meals are going to be more sustainable in the next century, and that we'll be eating 3D printed foods, meals that are made from powder, and meals that are made from algae over the next century. And of course that marries with what we see. So that was really interesting. But we also saw that Brits didn't really know anything about innovation coming from agricultural waste, which is also another form of innovation that's taking place at the moment. We could talk about that a little bit more, but it's really interesting. People don't know that's taking place. And also, a lot. With BOSH, we cook vegan food, we cook plant-based food. And the reason we do that is because it is a more sustainable option with lower carbon footprint. And as confirmed by the study, a lot of the people who are eating plant-based are doing so because it's better for the planet. So some really interesting insights coming out of there. And it's good to see there is innovation happening in the food space and that the UK knows about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And where do you sort of see it going? I mean, you sort of mentioned there, like, you get some sort of awareness, but I mean, where will this go, do you think, in terms of what sort of types of foods will be available? How are people going to sort of prepare these foods? Just like, do you have like more of an insight in terms of where do you think this will go in the next few years?
Yeah, absolutely. So we mentioned those three, right? So we mentioned algae. We mentioned, and this was what the Brits mentioned, they were going to be seeing algae, powdered foods, and plant-based steaks. The plant-based, 3D printed steaks. The 3D printed foods, we're already seeing them start to hit some shelves. So you can now buy 3D printed steak in some of the supermarkets in the UK. They're made from soy, combination of soy and sunflower oil, and a little bit of algae as well, in the form of carrageenan. So how amazing to see that you can actually buy some of these 3D printed foods already. We're going to be seeing more of that, and we think that the costs will start to come down. At the moment, one of those 3D printed steaks will cost you about the same price as a good quality steak. But in the future, as innovation develops, we would expect to see that cost come down. Now, of course, these powdered foods that they're talking about, you can already consume powdered foods in the UK. There are various different companies offering nutritionally complete meals in bottles that you either buy off the shelf or you shake yourself. And actually, what's really interesting about those is they possibly offer better nutrition than most of us are getting if we just pick up a meal deal from your local express supermarket. And the algae is an interesting one as well. So algae is very sustainably grown. It's a great source of nutrients. It may also have, in fact, different types of algae have very powerful nutritional benefits, from improving the way that your cells work to helping with weight loss and the like. So really exciting to see that all of these innovations are coming and are going to become more commonplace over the years to come.
I mean, yeah, that's interesting. And in terms of people out there that are concerned, that aren't quite sure about what all this entails. I mean, I can only speak anecdotally. Some people that I speak to they're kind of concerned about where this is going in terms of availability. What sort of, you mentioned there like the algae, the nutritional benefits and other things like that, but in terms of sort of like what goes into these foods, I know you sort of touched on a few things there, and it's another story for another day, but like if anyone's sort of listening in are concerned about sort of where the direction of this is going type thing, I mean, what generally goes into plant-based foods?
Well, the first thing to realise is that the status quo of normal food that normal people in the UK eat is very poor. We eat poor food in the UK. So we're not starting from a good place. Like, we buy a lot of processed foods, whether it's, crisps that are made from reformulated corn, whether it's super sugary snacks that are incredibly bad for us, or whether it's just all of these things that are filled with the perfect balance of carbs and fat to make us feel like they're delicious, and maybe sugar. So I'm thinking about things like donuts or French fries. We have poor diets to begin with. So let's be aware of that. And then it's good if we all look at labels, and it's good if we start to read what's in the foods that we buy. But if consumers and listeners do start to think about these plant-based alternatives and read the labels, I think what they'll find is that actually that what's in those plant-based meats is good, and you have actually a very good source of protein that's clean and healthy for the people, but also better for the environment. But you'll only know that if you read it for yourself on the label, and don't believe what we read in the headlines, because the headlines will go one way one week and then the other way the next.
No, absolutely, for sure. And I mean, in my experience, I have to say that, like you mentioned there, I suppose, I do sometimes sort of check the labels, what sort of goes in the food. But I mean, now you've got like ranges, like for example, you've got a gluten-free range, you've got all sorts of different things. But when you sort of stop and read the labels, it's like it's a bit of a minefield, because, and then on top of that, sometimes sort of, you buy fruit and vegetables, and should it be organic, should it not be organic? It is a bit of a minefield out there. I think that's a difficult thing. I'm speaking from personal experience. I think sort of, it's just, there's so much information out there, and there's so much to digest as well. I mean, what can people do? I know you mentioned there obviously labels, but is there any way you can sort of signpost people to maybe sort of like read and get, take a bit of time to sort of process all this and maybe like read through and see what's out there and what it sort of consists of?
I think one of the best things that people can do if they're concerned about what's in their food is to eat whole foods largely where possible. So go to the fruit and veg aisle and pick up some potatoes or some peppers or tomatoes, whatever it may be. Go to the grains aisle and go and get some nice rice, or go and get some dried beans and cook those. Or one of the best aisles is the nuts and seeds, because nuts are a great source of protein, great source of natural fats. And we were actually over in California not so long ago, and we were lucky enough to go and meet some almond farmers. And the amount of good quality innovation that's going into the growing of almonds and to extract all the most out of them is really phenomenal. So almonds, they're really, really protein rich, as I said before. They're really delicious. They're really versatile, but they've got a great shelf life as well. They've only like 2 years. You can sit on a shelf for 2 years. But not only are the almond farmers producing the almonds, they are now producing byproducts from what used to be waste products. So, for instance, the hulls of almonds are now being made into coffee, tea, kombucha, even beer and snack bars. So, yeah, there's an awful lot of innovation in the food space currently, but one of the best things that individuals can do when it comes to knowing what they're eating is just eating whole foods from the fruit and veg aisle.
And I think that's one example of an industry that's doing some really, really, really good things. But if you haven't got the time to do that research yourself, there are some shortcuts. So there's an app called Yuka, Yuka, which is a food scanner. And we don't have any affiliation with this app, but it's gonna give you a kind of a traffic light system. You can just scan a food when you're in the supermarket. Obviously, you don't need to scan an orange, because an orange is an orange, but you can scan all of those packaged goods and see whether they're good or maybe not so good. And I think, organic can be a bit of a distraction. So make sure you clean your food well. And if you can afford organic, sure, go for it. But if not, I think don't stress too much about it and just wash it well or peel it well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think I've taken note of the app as well. I think I'll sort of check it out myself, to be fair. I think it's sort of save a lot of time for sure. I mean, like in terms of the environment, sort of we've heard a lot about the environment and sort of foods as well, sustainable foods as well. I mean, look, I'm all for it myself. Like I must admit myself, I don't really eat meat. It's the choice I've made is, I'll be quite honest, is not just down to the environment, just sort of like preference for a number of years. It just doesn't work for me, so I've looked at other types of food to eat and learning all the time. But the other side to the environment argument, and I'm sure you'll have seen debates around this about sort of the transportation of sort of foods. What would you guys say to that in terms of, like the other side to the argument? People say, okay, well, it takes so much to transport avocados or almonds or whatever else. Really, what would your take be on that? If
Yeah, it's a great point, and one we've heard a lot. And it doesn't bear truth when you actually look into the data. So when you look into foodstuffs in general, and if you could look at the Oxford University study by Joseph Poor, if you want to reference this, transport typically only accounts for about 5 to 10% of greenhouse gas emissions of a food. So only 5 to 10% of the emissions are coming from transport. If you think about those ships, they actually are very greenhouse gas efficient. They pack those ships very full if they're shipping nuts, almonds, etc., or avocados. But what makes a much bigger difference to the greenhouse emissions of your diet is the foods that you choose to eat. So for example, the greenhouse gas emissions of a fistful of steak will be 40 times as much as the greenhouse gas emissions of an avocado that was shipped from South America, even if the steak came from your local farm. So it just doesn't stack up when you look at the data. It's really important people know that, because this can be a little bit of a red herring when people are trying to eat more sustainably. Is they think it's local, so it must be good. Doesn't have much impact on the greenhouse gas emissions of the food.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I suppose I'm sort of mindful of time. I suppose from my perspective here, one of the things I'm sort of looking at the moment. I guess while I've got you guys on, you might be able to sort of signpost me, and maybe other listeners too might sort of be interested in this area too. The area I'm trying to work on is coffee. I suppose I go through phases where I probably drink more than I should. What's your take on maybe a sort of coffee alternative? Not that I'm going to sort of not drink any anymore, but the goal is to try and cut back, but find something else that can sort of as an alternative. Do you guys have any sort of anything that you can, any suggestions around that sort of?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first one would be when these almond hull-based coffee alternatives come out, because they're brand new, but when they come out, they'll be on my shopping list.
And they're delicious. But until then, have you ever tried functional mushrooms, Jimmy?
I tried them a few years ago, but I've looked at them again, I must admit, but there's just so many on the market, I'm not quite sure which one to go for, to be fair. It's like, you read one and one will say they're better than the other type thing, so it's just sort of knowing which one to go for, really.
Would you like me to say the brand name on radio?
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, I'll check it out for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Called Space Goods. Space Goods, I've been drinking this stuff for about the past 18 months, and previously to drinking Space Goods, I was taking functional mushrooms for about 5 years in pill form. But this is a great way to get chaga mushroom, lion's mane mushroom, reishi mushroom, a whole really wonderful blend that will give you great clarity, give you great energy, give you the fantastic focus and none of the jitteriness that comes from regular coffee. Another thing about functional mushrooms, which is really good, is it's very, very environmentally friendly in comparison to coffee beans, which actually are one of the least sustainable food products.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I have been sort of like consuming, funnily enough, like mushrooms, or get organic ones, or sort of more regularly, maybe like 2-3 times a week. I can see the benefits of that, but for sure. I mean, I'll check out the alternative for sure. It's one of them. It might not be sort of completely coming off, coffee, but might be okay. Can I sort of regulate throughout the day an alternative and hopefully move in that direction. But no, it's been great for that. Really appreciate your time. It's been really informative and interesting, and have a fantastic day. Thank you.
No, it's been a pleasure, Jimmy. Thanks very much for your time.